Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. The next episode of Red Valkyrie is about to start.
Hi, I'm your host Shae Zombie, and I'm here with the Mike Anden. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm excellent, Shay. I'm really good. Thanks for having me on.
Good. I'm super to hear it, and I'm glad to get you on. So, because you have a world on the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Oh,
got Mortal Worlds, which recently just got funded, met its goal. So really excited about that. So happy that people want to get this into their hands, and I can't wait for everybody to read it. But yeah, the campaign, we still got a little ways to go before the campaign closes. So yeah, we're going to keep on rolling.
you have 15 more days, right?
Yeah,
Perfect. So, what
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
is Mortal Worlds about?
Modern Worlds, I would say, kind of like Star Wars meets Lord of the Rings type of deal, but with a dash of Lovecraftian horror added to the mix. It's also pretty straightforward kind of tale of good and evil between a kind of protector of his planet, a guy called Cade Saiga, and an adversary who's just kind of new on the scene, but he's kind of been watching this guy for a while, sizing him up and ready to get him out of the way so that his master can take over the planet. Uh, but if you don't mind, I can go into a little more detail about how these adversaries kind of like
Yeah.
meet. So Cade Saiga, the protagonist, he's like this wisecracking special forces guy. He gets usually sent to mop up all kinds of military hot zones around the world. But he's failed to capture a fugitive who's tried to blow up his home base. So his commanders, they're really pissed with him, and they've sent him now on a secret, most likely one-way mission, kind of like a forfeit. And the assignment's to steal this ancient sword from a hidden dimension that they've recently discovered. They figured, oh, he can deal with this one, even though it's hardly any chance that he's going to be able to get it back. Uh, he does manage to bring it back after a little getting waylaid a little, but he's followed into our world by this very kind of berserk giant knight, kind of an entity from that world who seems to be its guardian and the sword's real owner. And so this kind of creature, he's been freed from banishment. So when Cade gets the sword back to, he's taken it from its resting place. He arrives home only to find that he's led real trouble into his own world. It's like his commanders have set him up to do this. Uh, and it looks like no one's going to come to assist him either. So he tries to use this blade. It's like a mystic rune blade to defend himself, but he's totally outmatched by this real, kind of ancient warrior. And the fugitive, the guy who was chasing after earlier but failed to bring in, actually
Mhm.
returns with a gunship. So it looks like his mission isn't over yet. So luckily for Cade, this guy gets him out of there. And Cade thinks, okay, well, I've got some backup here, but no, this guy's telling him, no, you're not going back for this, to take on this guy. Your commanders are up to no good. There's a conspiracy going on to destroy your whole world and further out into the wider universe. And this kind of creature is the harbinger of all of this destruction. And so he goes, well, we definitely got to turn back if this is the case. But the guys go, no, you're totally outmatched. But I'm going to take you to some guys who are going to like basically show you how to use this weapon. So he's kind of got possession of it now. It's his now, and
Mhm.
yeah, he's going to see if he can use it to to benefit his world. But he is seriously out of his depth. He's going to find that out real soon.
So he's basically like always kind of been the star of everything, and then all of a sudden he finds
Yeah,
himself
yeah,
someplace where he is horribly
yeah.
outmatched.
He's kind of been his world's kind of star quarterback type of guy.
I
They said,
love
"Oh
it.
yeah, he'll take care of this issue and that," and so he's got kind of reputation, but he's kind of gotten kind of complacent in his old age. So this guy is going to take him out, and unless he shapes up really quickly and discovers how to work with people who know better, originally these people were the ones who banished this creature. So he's got to kind of like get over his preconceptions about all kinds of mysticism, and sorcery. So it's not all kind of a military type of deal. So yeah, he's kind of like this cynical rogue kind of archetype, but he's going to come in for a rude awakening.
Yeah. This is interesting. So, looking at kind of what you got going for your story. I mean, first off, it just looks like it's constant action.
Yeah, this is kind of like my idea is that because we've got 48 pages to tell the story, so it's kind of like it's a condensed battle. One of the kind of main things that kind of like what influenced me is like Terminator 2, when the whole thing was kind of like this chase. You got a couple of quiet kind of scenes, protracted scenes in there, but really it's kind of non-stop action.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. So I actually do have a question because I attempt to cosplay anytime I bring somebody on, and your characters are just a huge pain in the ass when it comes to quick cosplay because there's no quick about them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
you've done
kind
an
of noticed
amazing
the
job.
I kind of noticed the theme with the three down here where it's kind of black and red, but then you have the girl that I ended up picking who is more white and green.
Yeah.
What is her deal?
Yeah, she's actually the wife, estranged wife of the protagonist. Her name's Jaina Saiga, and she was actually more clued in to what's been going on at this facility than he was. But again, she kind of like got tired of all of his kind of bullheadedness and thinking, well, he knows how to run the show and he knows what trouble kind of befalls the world. And she's got her own career. She's an archaeologist, but he kind of thinks, well, archaeology doesn't really have anything to do with what's happening with the real trouble in the world. He's more used to dealing with stuff like sky pirates and all kinds of more kind of closer to home types of deal. So there are a lot of people who've almost been able to better him. He's had a few challenges to the title of being the kind of most formidable guy on his world. But because he's not so much of a brawler, I mean, he does that, but he kind of outthinks his way normally. He's quite cunning. He usually finds a kind of a shortcut towards defeating an opponent who usually has one over him. So he kind of still thinks, oh, ancient deity, whatever, we can take him. He really doesn't understand what the stakes are, but she does. And if he is able to make some kind of maybe recriminations with her, he might have a chance to learn a little more. But it's looking kind of unlikely because she is almost of the opinion it's better the devil these commanders of his who are responsible for this being coming into our world. She figures, well, actually, maybe they've got a kind of a handle on this creature. Maybe we can speak with them and see if there's some kind of like deal that can be worked out, or it can be contained, or maybe we can banish again. She's a little naive in her own right because she thinks that maybe there's still some diplomacy left. So every kind of character, they have their own strengths, but they also have their own weaknesses. So some may be more hard-headed, others may be kind of like a bit more earnest, but naive. But they all do also have their own specific actions, like they have their own specific weapons.
Right.
One of the most interesting things about because they're quite toyetic, I guess. When I was creating these characters, I was much envisaging them as kind of like action figures as they were actual people. It's not a contradiction to me because I'm a huge fan of action figures and all this kind of stuff. But
right.
So just as he's got this blade, there are other characters who have their own variations. They have either melee weapons or kind of firearms. But what's interesting is that all of these kind of weapons originate from a kind of a pocket universe. So they're kind of able to summon these things at will. He's never actually had one of his own type of these pocket universe weapons until, funnily enough, this sword has landed into his possession. So it's kind of like seemed like it's meant to be. He thinks, oh, well, this is what I've been missing all my life. Now I can really kind of like sort out some trouble. And I'll start off with this, this weird deity that everybody is so scared of.
Right.
he doesn't really know how to use it properly yet, but someone's going to show him the ropes and see if he can cut the mustard.
Right. So basically, he feels like he has an ace in the hole without any real reason.
Yeah, yeah. He thinks he's landed on his feet. Oh well, if this creature wants his weapon back so badly, it must be a big deal. It is a big deal, but it's not enough for him to be able to take him down.
It's very interesting, and his sword and the way that he's all kind of laid out, and then you look at Skullbale.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the same one.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the Skullbale actually has his own. It's like a kind of like a forgery. It's like a duplicate, but what it's missing is that it doesn't have anything in the ability of a mystic. It's a formidable military kind of tactical weapon, but Cade's gonna find out that this other blade has properties which the forgery doesn't have. But if he doesn't figure out how to use those, then he will be, it's going to be curtains for him.
So the thing I think is kind of interesting about that forgery that isn't quite going to be nearly as powerful whenever he finally figures out how to use this. But he does have something that Cade doesn't have. It's just a giant ass arm cannon.
Yeah, that arm cannon was. I think that probably I watched too many Transformers cartoons growing up or something. I think kind of Megatron's arm blaster kind of found its way into the design of this guy. What's also I haven't mentioned is that this being the Skullbale can actually also fly. So he's kind of like a Iron Man in that respect as well. There's very little actually that it can't do. Compared to Cade, who is more used to kind of like bar fights more than anything else, like a kind of like a military, cop, than actually having to deal with these deities. These are kind of a demigod. This being is. So he's kind of this Skullbale is worshipped in his own right, but he's not the top of the chain. He's like a little bit like the Silver Surfer in that he's only a kind of a herald. And his own master is on his way. He's just kind of paving the way. And
so he's like the small potatoes beforehand.
Yeah. He's like the Darth Vader to the Emperor. So you don't get to see the Emperor for a little while yet. It takes a while to get into the book before you get to see the big reveal.
So David wanted to know, is this inspired by a video game by chance?
Well, I mean, my misspent youth, I spent so much time playing video games, mainly kind of 8-bit and 16-bit back in my day. But there's a bit of contra in this, I think. Maybe there's more of that than anything else. I don't really play video games these days, but I'm really impressed with how far they've come since when I used to play them. So much so, I guess, that they're almost a little bit overwhelming to me because I think they look so immersive. It's like I can't really imagine why anybody would ever really want to come out and do anything else. But I guess what's still grabs me about comics is that I do love a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, which you can kind of get to quite briskly, that kind of cuts to the chase. So you can get immersed in this book, but there are quite a few Easter eggs and things, and there is a little scope for further adventures. So I do have ideas for further issues, but cool. that's more kind of like up in the air because I want to kind of just get this book into people's hands first and see what feedback I get and see if people got a particular direction they're interested in, and I might be able to follow up.
Perfect world, how many issues do you think you would have of this, or how many stories do you have kind of in your head ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like as a huge fan of George Lucas, when I first heard that he was playing around with the idea of doing 9 movies, this is back when kind of Star Wars first came out, the original trilogy, and it just kind of blew my mind, the prospect that that would ever happen. And I think for a long time, everybody gave up on the idea. So by the time he came up with he did the prequels, people already had in the back of their minds what what these movies were going to end up like. The Clone Wars and all that kind of stuff. It became so legendary, I think, in people's minds that almost no matter how good or bad he made the films, they would never quite live up to what was in people's expectations. So when I was growing up, and those movies weren't around anymore, so I was fully into things like Aliens and Terminator, the RoboCop, the kind of R-rated science fiction movies, huge on Paul Verhoeven and James Cameron, those kinds of guys, because I figured they were the ones who were kind of carrying the torch of, introducing you into this new world, which you could really kind of immerse yourself in and wonder about. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of like H.A. Geiger's vision, of the alien universe, in terms of almost not even needing to see that whole universe, but just what it implies about how much bigger the world and the cosmos really is, compared to the protagonists who are really kind of dwarfed. So that's I mentioned Lovecraft, I think, earlier, and when I say that there's a dash of Lovecraft, yeah, that probably does especially figure into the main kind of master of this adversary, who is I will give the name. It is a being called Zor, Zor, and which is the most ancient of all beings, as far as anyone in Cade's world is aware. But most people have never believed that this is anything more than a kind of a fairy tale or a boogeyman type of story, or ancient mysticism or religion. So it's a little bit like Satan. In the world, people may believe it or not, but in his world, it's a very real being. It just so happens to have been banished by the Lords of Light from the ancient times, who are still kicking around. A few of them. They weren't all completely exterminated, but the kind of evil forces had a really good go of it. So again, this idea that there is a constant kind of battle in the cosmos going on between good and evil. I guess it's one of the most popular notions in most of the world's religions and myths. It's always a fascinating kind of idea, whether you believe in it or not, because it seems that a lot of cultures arose almost around telling those kind of tales. I guess they were kind of like morality tales a lot of the time for people growing up, and then people adhered to them as a religion. But whatever they may have been, I guess we all have grown up with our own favorite variations on this kind of I don't know if you call it a trope or a kind of ancient story, myth. But I mean, there was Joseph Campbell, I believe, was a big influence on Lucas as well. And I've read a couple of books from Joseph Campbell. I can't really pretend I understood him too great, but this idea of the hero's journey, it's something that he kind of wrote about quite a lot, and it's something I think that you would find in so many kind of genre movies and also comics and video games. So you have a lot of the time you may have a protagonist who is certainly out of their depth for whatever reason. They've got Achilles' heels of all kinds. They are. I mean, you've got the whole notion of a Gary Stew or a Mary Sue, which is someone that you can't actually root for because they're too perfect. They can deal with everything straight away. And I'm certainly of the opinion that we need to get back to flawed heroes who actually need to learn their way. They need to kind of like go through a kind of a trial of fire for you to be able to gravitate to them and to feel that you're immersed in their story. And of course, there's only so much time that you can do that in a comic book or even a graphic novel. 48 pages isn't a lot for you to be able to build a lot of character. But what you can do is, I suppose, you can introduce people to the general gist of what a character is like with a few character nods and a few things they say which implies more about them than necessarily you're going to be able to say literally. So a lot of stuff in this book is it's through implication and gestures as much as anything.
David wanted to know, going back to the whole inspired by a video game, Contra Shattered Soldier.
Well, for me, Contra Shattered Soldier, that was more kind of like after my time. It was more the original Contra that came out in the late 80s, I think. That really kind of it gave people, I think, who probably thought the video games were maybe still kind of like in their infancy. I think a lot of people suddenly awoke to the possibilities of what action-oriented video games could really do, and how how addictive they could be. I mean, there were a lot of kind of games very much like it at the time, but I think it was definitely one of those breakout games in terms of level design and character design. There was a lot of influence also in that game from like movies like Aliens. So there was that was something that I could immediately see, and I immediately took to. So all the time when I was in high school and stuff, I was wasting a lot of time drawing on exercise books, drawing images like from what I saw in games and movies, much to the annoyance of my teachers. But here we are. we see the fruits of my labors at last.
Probably something that a lot of people ended up doing is, over here skin drawing and you're getting in trouble, science and whatever, and then you end up being able to, it's like, all those that I was wasting.
So, that's it. I remember when I was doing art classes, I would have a teacher saying to me, well, this is all very good, you're doing this kind of comic book stuff, but what if the bottom falls out of the market? You're going to need to be more versatile than that. So I guess that she was trying to get me into kind of more fine art and drawing from still life, and I did enjoy that kind of stuff as well, but my heart was never really in anything other than science fiction and fantasy, and it's certainly where I suppose my if I have a talent in this area, it's more because I've got so much passion for it. It's not because I was born with anything particular artistic ability, but I certainly have worked for a long time to try and get what's in my head to kind of like get onto paper, so that there is not too much difference. So what you see with this book is almost pretty much what is actually rattling around in my head. So I am pretty happy with it.
So we've got which is good, but you still have 15 days left, and you have a couple of cool stretch goals that I kind of wanted to go over. And and you've got some of these really interesting stretch goals. So when you hit 5,000 mark, at 10, they're getting a trading card of Cade. So this main character, bullheaded. 1,500 is evil deity dude. The massive.
Massive cannon.
20,000 is probably my most favorite of any stretch goal.
The awesome patch.
I really I love patches, and I'm really sorry, everybody. I think that my connection is being kind of a pain, so I'm sorry if everything is cutting out and things are acting wonky, because it definitely.
Oh, I'm good.
But yeah, so you've got a bit of a ways to go to hit those stretch goals, but there's definitely a lot of really cool ones that are available.
Hopefully we're going to get people kind of G'd up so we're kind of like moving on. The broader vision for this campaign, is to get some people some really cool stuff, for all of their support. Definitely.
Well, let's go over your perks, because you don't have a ton of perks, but you have
stripped down.
You have some good perks, and we want to make sure that people know how they can back you, so we can try and help get that number up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, your featured perk.
So first, the comic book, yeah, the graphic novel, and comes with the art of book. That's the featured perk, and so that's the $40 perk, and it's something that is, I think, it's the best deal because the art of book that supplements the graphic novel, if you want to buy it, that shows a lot of in detail concept art that went into creating the comic book. So it's not that really stuff didn't make the cut. It's just that the book itself, it's kind of like a world that's crafted from scratch. So there's not a lot in that world that is completely redolent of what's in the real world. So the costume design, the environments, the vehicles, the kind of like they're kind of really quite fantastical. So the art of book features a lot of those, both preparation sketches and finished color concept art. It's a full color book, 32 page book, the art of. And if you're a fan of concept art books, such as those that are done for, big blockbuster movies and such, I think you get real blast out of the Art of Mortal Worlds as well. So that's the featured perk. It's I'm really happy with being able to offer those two because I think people are going to have a blast with those. But you can buy the art of book on its own as well. It's $20 on its own if that's the kind of thing you want to dip into first. See, well, maybe what was the inspiration for the book, and then you want to dive into the book. The book itself is $26, I believe. The graphic novel, 48-page, full color, and it's a kind of a one and done. It's a full, complete story, but yeah, there is a little scope, a little kind of maneuvering room at the end that we can expand that world. Maybe if the time comes. So there are more books I've got in mind, but this one at the moment is the one that I really love everybody to catch this time around. And yeah, we also I believe we also have a sketch available as an added perk. This one will be $37. If you want to get a head sketch of the main character, that'd be a card back sketch. That would be pretty cool as well. I do remember that when I was coming up with all of these characters, I had to get used to drawing them quite a lot. And so I don't have any kind of problem with doing a lot of these. So if anybody does want to add to their perk to get themselves a sketch card, yeah, I think you're going to like it. It's it's going to be they're all going to be done very nicely. They're not going to be just like whipped out all of a sudden. I'm going to take my time with them.
Added on
Yeah.
after you're going through to actually.
That's right.
Okay.
Also, these images of Cade and the Skull Bale, that's not necessarily what is going to be on the trading cards. They will have original design. So I've got more of kind of like action poses in mind for these characters. But what you see here is kind of like the finished kind of front images of when I first created them. In the art of book, you actually do get to see quite a lot of characters kind of from behind and front. So there's some cool design elements and a few things you might miss in the book as well. Special Easter eggs about these characters. It's going to be a lot to catch. And there's also a few articles as well about what it went into the creation process. And I did create this entire story with my wife as well, Caroline. She's the editor and co-writer and co-creator. And yes, so she's kind of ensured that this book it could have rolled out into probably something that was like too many pages and impractical to actually get into a single book. So she managed to make sure that this is a really fun-packed kind of streamlined book. I didn't get to kind of like go too off in the deep end into kind of lore. She says everybody always, when they create something, she knows as well as anyone that I love the lore, so does she, but you've got to, in the end, you've got to work together with someone who can rein you in a little and make sure that you don't pull your punches in terms of the story.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, I love that you and your wife kind of teamed up to do this. That's really nice to see, especially when you have two passionate people about comics who team up together to bring, because we've had comic creators that are, husband wife duos in the past, and things have not exactly gone to plan. And people in plenty of examples, and we're not going to get into those, but I love seeing when you have a husband and wife that have the same passion and the same desire, want to tell that story and bring it to CG and bring it to indie comics and actually get successful. Where, I mean, you guys are funded and you still have half of your campaign left.
Yeah, we're so jazzed about it. It's just the support's just been amazing, and again, we just hugely appreciate everybody who's helped to promote, who's had us on their shows and be generous to their time. But we've promoted the book in any way, and of course our backers as well. And we certainly we hope to give you full value for money. And these stretch goals hopefully will be kind of like a show of that.
Exactly. Well, so I do have a question for you. It says you have 15 days left. Is this your first 30 days? Is this your second?
This is the first, yeah.
Do you think that you might consider extending? I know that you're still a ways out before you kind of make that call.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm considering it seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that this has a lot of really interesting action, and that, are you the artist on this as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, because the art style is very unique and very, like, it's not one that I've seen in a whole lot of other kind of works, and so that's why I was curious if it was you or if you had a different artist.
Oh yeah.
But I like it. You kind of.
I was going to say one of my favorite artists is Simon Bisley. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's a kind of a British painter, and he's done work on Lobo in the States, and I think Ninja Turtles, quite a few things. But he's got a very distinctive style. So when I was kind of learning how to, originally I was going to create this book as a painted work, and then I figured, well, because I'm not much good at painting, I did it with traditional inks. But digital coloring, and so the coloring technique that I use, definitely there's a bit of influence in that style from this Simon Bisley. He's had quite a few imitators in his day as well, but everybody who ends up kind of imitating them tends to veer off into their own style sooner rather than later. So I guess that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Well, and I really, I kind of enjoy the heavy, you have really heavy lines, like really heavy ink lines. And it's, it really reminds me of like old school comics from, where everything was just.
Very bold.
The colors were hyper saturated, and I really like it. It's kind of like a back.
I think it was Michael Bancroft who said that it looks to him like Jack Kirby doing Cable, which is actually I think like a real compliment. That is
that's a massive compliment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I gotta say, the thing that I find interesting about your colors as well is the fact that there's something that everybody tries to do in comics, but very few can actually do convincing. This bright glow of these explosions, and you have all of this like ethereal light and stuff, and it looks like it is super bright. Like if you were there, it looks like it would be blinding you, and it would be overwhelming. And it's easy to make it muddy.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's to me it's quite dreamlike, I suppose. For me, a lot of the imagery here, when I look at it, it seems to me, it could be in a movie, but more to me, it's more redolent of a dream or something, or a kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
that's in full Technicolor. Yeah.
I feel like a very vibrant nightmare might be a little bit more fitting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you ever seen the movie Suspiria?
yes.
The original one is. I haven't seen the more recent one, but the original one I'm a huge fan of as well. And the kind of the cinematography on that, I think, had a big impact on me when I first saw that as well, because where I guess a lot of us were used to seeing horror movies that kind of like just use all shadows and kind of muted colors. But Suspiria went the other way around and really created this sense of mood and atmosphere through these very bright kind of primary colors, and
Yes.
as well as use of shadow. And I was really impressed with that because it was so different. It really took you into a different place, and I'm surprised more kind of directors, even horror directors, don't use that so much. Maybe a few more now, but I was
Yeah,
influenced
that's
by that.
very true. I mean, and the thing is I think a lot of people underestimate just how impactful color can be to story. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to tell something that's really heavy or really disturbing, the color
Mm-hmm.
palette that you choose is what's going to help sell that probably most, because color invokes feeling and emotion.
Yeah,
And so pair that with whatever story you're telling, and that's really going to kind of help sell whatever it is, or it's going to completely throw it off kilter.
totally. You can
When
kind
we
of
had
really
Doc
kind of
Hogg
make.
on, we had Doc
Sorry.
Hogg on for Tilt, and he had a scene, and he imagined the scene being bright yellows and golds and things like that because it was the afterlife, but it was an
Mm-hmm.
entity that was basically extorting a newly deceased person.
Yeah.
And when he gave it to his artist or his colorist was like, "Ooh, I see it as like deep blues and bright teals." And so that's what she gave back to him. And he was like, "Not at all what I expected, but it fits so much better because it happy, joyous, like positive scene. It's literally being
It's just
extorted.
like you in.
And so that made a huge difference in that panel. And
Yeah.
I think that you're doing a good job here on making this feel really intense.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like when I'm drawing, it's almost like I'm looking at this stuff in almost 3 dimensions. It looks to me like, I want to put my hand through, and I guess we're back to the action figures, really. You almost play with the action figures and tell the story through that way. But I guess what I have ultimately with this story is that all of these characters they live in my mind, I suppose, as much as they live on the page. So when I read through some, occasionally I will have some characters yeah, that's quite in keeping with what I do, and another time it would be, oh, that's actually not much what I do. And so, well, what's going on? Am I crazy here? I've got like
Yeah.
these characters that are talking to me now, but that's how long we've kind of been living with them now. They've got their own
They've got their own
take on everything.
personality and their
Yeah,
own story to tell. And it's good that you have such a on what is within character and what is outside of their character, because that's also a really hard thing to maintain, especially when you have a small amount of characters. You have a decent amount of people that you're keeping track of. So to kind of give them all their own personality and not break and not have them just be pieces of each other, that's
yeah,
a difficult thing to do.
yeah. It's you bet. I would say maybe kind of like a third of the characters know each other, and all the rest are kind of all strangers to each other. So you do get the kind of experience of meeting new characters, and you're kind of taken by the hand to be introduced to them. It's not like all of these guys. It's like I've come to a party and all these guys know each other. It's not like that at all. There's a few that who are kind of like they're on first name terms with each other, but the rest of it is like it's as much an adventure for them and an introduction to this world for them as it is for the reader. So hopefully that's kind of a nice way for people to kind of like immediately get into the get into the action.
Well, and it gives you kind of a foot in the door to have a much more natural like intro instead of
Yeah.
it being shoehorned, because the other characters don't know
Mm-hmm.
everybody else as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge believer in show don't tell is the other thing. So there's not much in the way of kind of info dumping or anything like that.
Mhm.
I'm not a huge fan of that in comics and movies. So so the dialogue, it's there's some nice dialogue there, but it's kind of fairly sparse. You notice there's quite a lot of action there, but the dialogue is more kind of like salt and pepper to give you a kind of like a fast moving sense of where these characters' minds are at any one time, and kind of like how they're bouncing off each other, and
Yeah.
the friction that also exists between some of them.
Oh,
And
that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean, the
Um,
bad guys, I mean, they're very bad. There's not a lot of kind of gray area,
there's no
so
redeeming
it does give
qualities.
you a kind of yeah. So you do have a kind of a reason to root for the protagonists. Pretty early on, you get to see some pretty kind of nasty stuff from in terms of the villains. They've got a kind of they've got a taste for torture, whether it be
Mhm.
psychological or kind of physical as much as anything, and you do want to see them get taken down.
Oh, that's actually refreshing to not have a can relate to. Sometimes it's nice to just have bad guys that are bad guys that you're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
rooting to be taken down.
yeah, totally.
Um, so and we did touch on this a little bit, but Wise Guy was saying that it looks like it's the start of a series of books, and he's asking, are you planning to do 5 or more?
I think probably the reason why he might say that is because of I don't know if it's evident how much world building went into designing it. Uh, but truth to be told, I don't really have a set number at all. I couldn't say whether I've got 5 books or another 3. I'd say at the outside, maybe another 3 books, would tell the story of everything I'd want to with these characters, because I do have other ideas that I want to pursue as well
Mm-hmm.
outside of Mortal Worlds. I do love this world and its characters. I love the design elements, and but sometimes you can sometimes wish there was more, but you could actually break it if you actually try to add too much to it.
Right. Like
Because
you
yeah,
there's so many series, and that happens all the time. Television shows, there's so many series that have really, really interesting storylines that are going on, and you're really invested, and it's going good, and you keep on saying more, but then when they start giving you more, you're like, I'm getting sick of this. This is like, it was so
yeah,
much nicer if you would have left it at season 3.
yeah. It's nice when you see people, they've got some kind of they've got a bit of reserve. They kind of like they know when to stop and not to
Yes,
kind of yeah. But it depends. If people are begging for more, I'm happy to hear everybody. But there's a limit, and I think that you've got to set the limit for yourself.
absolutely. Wise Guy, again, you do a 30-day extension where you remain in demand. We have talked about that. He is heavily considering it, but he still has 15 days on his first 30 days.
Hmm.
Uh, so, no, is there any plans to release a T-shirt?
Yeah, I'd love to do a T-shirt as well. I'd definitely consider that. It's the first time it's been raised to me, but yeah,
You know, a T-shirt would
I
be
could
kind
think
of a
about
good
that.
25K goal, like the how you have
Hmm.
it to be announced.
Hmm.
That could be a
Yeah,
pretty
I
cool.
think it's going to be announced. So that's something that probably that grabs me quite nicely. I'd love a T-shirt for myself as much as anything. Yeah,
See,
yeah.
that's
I'll definitely bear that in mind. Wise guys, that's a great
ooh.
suggestion.
See, look, you come to Red Valkyrie, you ask your questions, you might influence a campaign. It sounds
That's
great,
yeah.
right?
That's how it's done.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I don't see any other questions. Did you have any other last little bits that you wanted to kind of hit with your book?
Uh, yeah, I'd like to say that so far, all of the support we've had for everybody, with this campaign, it's just been so awesome. There have been suggestions from people that they've got certain characters that they kind of they'd like to know more about, and they say, does this character actually feature in the book in any big way, or is this more kind of like is this something part of a larger plan? So that takes us back to, I suppose, some of the questions we have. Is this going to be like 5 more books? Every character you see on the cover does kind of have a starring role in the book as is, but there's a couple of that are more kind of cameos than having kind of like a feature role. but I would love to give every one of these characters more action, more depth. If the time is right and if the demand is there, I'd love to explore more. But the real kind of the focus on the story is those three characters out in front, really, which is Cade in the middle. You've got the woman on the left there is Cara Flynn. She's kind of like kind of a second command, and you've got kind of the guy on the right there, the machine gunner. That's Vance, and he's kind of like a mentor to both of them. But he's also very kind of abrasive, so he's probably not the best person to kind of like help them in this mission against something which is way more kind of esoteric, I guess. So Cade's wife, Jaina, and also that guy with the mask that you see up there, they're going to be playing a very instructive role in this book. But if people say that they've got their favorites and they're curious to find out about more of these characters, hit me up, and I'd love to know. I'd love to know what people think works or doesn't.
That's awesome. I love it when creators are willing to kind of communicate and talk with their fan base about kind of the details of it, because sometimes trying to get something like a book out or something that's going to fill all of that information is just not practical, either funding wise, time wise, whatever it may be. But to bring your fans in and just kind of like, hey, we're just going to have a discussion. If you want to know more about these characters, let me know and I'll give you kind of backstory to get you a little bit more excited.
I love all of that. I mean, I love it when creators, they're able to, share their own ideas with the fans. I've been pestering, plenty of people in CG about, can you tell us more about this guy? And a lot of the time it's, well, wait for the book, or there's more information coming. But I'm always up for a bit of kind of gossip on what really makes these characters tick. Because if you see a design you really love, sometimes you just need to know, or get a little something, kind of like a taster of what's to come. And,
right.
That's for me, that's one of the big, most fun aspects of CG. It's almost like it's like the original bullpen. I think with Marvel, you get the sense that you've got the fans, you've got the creators, and there's it's not like kind of like a fence between anybody anymore. It's like it's all kind of like it's like a lounge or a bar, and everybody's just hanging out and chilling and exchanging ideas.
Exactly. It's like we're all just hanging out in one gigantic living room and just bullshitting away.
And you sometimes you get to talk with somebody who you never thought you'd even get to meet, or you meet a creator and you can see, oh, I know exactly where he's coming from. I'd love to talk to this guy. And with this medium, now we got YouTube, you can actually do it, and they love to share their ideas as well. They love to hear from people. It's so different now to how things were when I was growing up reading comics, when there was this kind of like I don't know if you ever heard of there was a concept called the wall, or the source wall, which was created by Jack Kirby in DC Comics, and it was this idea that surrounding the universe was like this impenetrable barrier. It's as far as humanity or any alien species could ever get. It's kind of the end of the line. And for so long, I think a lot of fans kind of felt, well, there's also this barrier. You can't. There's only so much contact you can ever have with your favorite creators, or even creators you want to just feed back to and say, I'd like to see more of this and less of that. But now that kind of wall has kind of crumbled, if you like, and now it really is. It's whoever is willing to listen and and talk and kind of to basically be friends with the fans, as opposed to have an attitude which is that there is kind of like an ivory tower situation going on, because that was maybe worked for in the industry for a long while, but now there's a new attitude, and to me it's very much like the punk ethic. It's like punk rock music to me, and it's like everybody can have a go now, and it's all about who actually is most impassioned, who's having the most fun, that draws the most people to him, and I think that's what everybody loves to see.
I definitely agree. We had one final question, slight joke, with a final from Contra 1, 2, or 3.
I think it would definitely be probably more like the boss from Contra 1, because I think that's the only one I played. I do vaguely remember the second one, but already the technology was like getting so far ahead. I was thinking, oh, it's losing me a little bit. I like it. I didn't like it when it went all, those games went all kind of 3D and everything, or behind the shoulder. I liked very much the side scroller type of action, and I know that that game series had kind of gone back to that, because again, I think it's the fans were saying, it's all great that you've got all these new techniques and you can make things so incredibly realistic, but we want just a simple side scroller, with the simple controls, just spice it up a bit, just add a bit of kind of 2020s pizzazz to it. So in some ways, I guess that's what you get with Mortal Worlds as well. It's kind of good traditional action adventure, but hopefully with a kind of like a modern kind of vibe to it, a modern sheen.
Well, honestly, the book looks very interesting, and it's definitely got that nostalgia feel. It's got a really cool kind of sci-fi bent, and I love the fact that it's a husband and wife team. That's kind of bringing this. That's a selling point for me, because I think that's really awesome. So I want to thank everyone in the for coming out. You guys, as always, are just amazing. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming and spending time with me, and
it's been awesome. It's been great.
Flexing to my schedule, because I'm always such a pain in the ass. I had to make us move 30 minutes, but I very much appreciate you coming out. It has been an absolute pleasure. Make sure that you go and back Mortal Worlds. If you haven't, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link right now in the chat. It is also in the description of the video, so go check it out, back it. Let's help get Mike up. And so he's got a couple of those really awesome stretch goals that he's wanting to provide to us. And do not forget, please, to like, share, and subscribe to Red Valkyrie. I appreciate every last one of you guys. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And I cannot wait to see how this does. You still have a good amount of time, so fingers crossed.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Absolutely. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah.